Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Ms. Ramsey?
Here.
Mayor Pons?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Here.
Ms. Kernscher?
Here.
Okay, today we have two matters of special privilege, and first is the thank you and farewell to Miss Lara Overy. So, Laura, if you would meet me at the podium. Council's prepared a resolution, and I'd like to present it to you. And so it says, whereas Ms. M.S. Lara Overy has resigned from the office effective January 1st, 2024, after first being elected November 2017 and having served one full term and a partial term totaling 6 years. And where through her administration, Ms. Overy deployed the education she gained at Virginia Peninsula Community College and the William and Mary, and her work experience serving as Chief Operating Officer at Compass Wealth Strategies. And whereas Ms. Overy has dedicated her service to the citizens of Williamsburg under the motto that all businesses are reporting accurately and being taxed fairly. And whereas under her creed for taxation, she has modernized the office to be more efficient, timely, accurate, and the assessments of personal property taxes and business and professional license fees. And during her tenure as Commissioner of Revenue, she oversaw the migration of the new record tracking and billing system, worked to move more data from analog to digital formats, and scrutinized internal process for the appropriate submission from the citizens and businesses alike. And whereas earlier in her administration, Ms. Overy advocated for the establishment through the City Council approval, the auditor position within her office to review longstanding business accounts in a complicated tax and non-taxable environment, resulting in increased revenue and greater understanding of the tax liability. And whereas Ms. Overy obtained and trained the training required to be designated Master of Commissioner of Revenue and has served the citizens and the state as a member of the statewide Commissioner of Revenues Association Executive Board. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that on behalf of the citizens of Williamsburg, the Williamsburg City Council does hereby thank and commend the Honorable Lara M.S. Overy, Commissioner of Revenue, for her dedication to the office that she held and extend her the best wishes for the future.
Thank you.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you again, Ms. Overy. Okay, and another farewell. Today is Councilman Rogers' last day on City Council, and we've prepared a resolution for him as well. And I've asked my colleagues on City Council to share it in reading this for me. So I'll begin, and then after we're going to take some pictures out front, so put on your smiley face. So whereas Caleb T. Rogers, after serving as a member of the Williamsburg City Council for 4.5 years, will leave council on December 31st, 2024.
And whereas Mr. Rogers began his relationship with the City of Williamsburg as an intern with the city's Economic Development Office before successfully running for City Council in 2020, and
whereas taking office only 4 months into the COVID-19 global pandemic, Mr. Rogers unstintingly has supported the city's residents, business community, staff, and larger regional efforts to combat the pandemic and its momentous impacts, including support for the provision of creative and effective alternative service delivery methods, providing financial assistance to the city's business community, locally led regional cooperative efforts to ensure the health and safety of the Williamsburg community, and the wise investment of recovery funds. And
whereas Mr. Rogers has been a devoted champion of affordable housing and environmental sustainability, serving on the city's Affordable Housing Work Group in 2021, motivating the City Council to set aside ARPA funds for future affordable housing projects, and encouraging Council to adopt a 40x40 plan to reduce the city's carbon emission footprint 40% by the year 2040 as part of Council's 25-26 biennial goals, initiatives, and outcomes. And
whereas seeking to build upon the strong and collaborative relationship between William and Mary students and city government, Mr. Rogers inspired Williamsburg's partnership with the Charles Center on the City Research Scholars Internship to create opportunities for students to gain public policy experience while furthering the city's strategic objectives. And
Whereas ensuring Williamsburg residents and businesses remain informed and engaged, upon taking office, Mr. Rogers established a monthly newsletter of city activities, council actions, and community events throughout his term. And
Whereas Mr. Rogers represented Williamsburg on several boards and commissions while on council, including the Virginia First Cities, the Virginians for High-Speed Rail Board of Directors, Old Town Medical and Dental Clinic, and the Williamsburg Redevelopment and Housing Authority Board of Commissioners.
Now, therefore, let it be resolved, on behalf of the citizens of Williamsburg, the Williamsburg City Council does hereby thank and commend Councilmember Caleb T. Rogers for public service of the highest order and extend best wishes for the future success. So thank you very much, Caleb.
Okay to take the podium up here and say a few words? I appreciate the mention of my newsletter. It's good to know a couple people read that. It might have really just been a couple. There were a few that I met during the campaign that stuck with it, and then my grandmother was the other. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity to serve here, for my council colleagues, certainly for city staff, and obviously everyone who lives in Williamsburg and comes to our meetings and partakes in this process. It's hard to know exactly what to say about a job that meant so much to you. So I tried to go back and see in 2022 in December's meeting with an exiting city council member then what went on and what was said, and I only really walked away thinking I should have gotten a haircut then. But I figured I'd keep up that trend of looking back, and so thinking back 4 years ago, I realized I can leave Williamsburg with a full heart today, realizing just how much we've gotten through in the last 4.5 years. As was mentioned, 4.5 years ago, our small community was dealing with international issues. COVID was still running rampant, and there were rightful and loud calls to address Williamsburg's racial equity. But here we are 4 years later, and case in point, just today, we've seen tourism back in full force, especially during this holiday season, and today this city council will vote for a historic African American heritage trail. On top of that, too, I'm proud of some other things we've done, and I do promise to be brief in the remarks, but I thought it would help to quantify in 6 numbers. So the first is 2, and that's 2 new headquarters opened or under construction for our fire department and our police department. These groups of individuals are so service-oriented. We're thrilled we've gotten to modernize city infrastructure and hopefully add to constituent services through those institutions. So extremely proud to have opened 2 new headquarters. The second is 4. 4 is 4 recommendations from the workforce housing group that we got to pursue after the group studied the issue at length in 2021. And I'm excited for more that are on the way that we'll address in the GIOs tonight. The third is 4,303, and that's emails in my sent folder. That is because of a goal to get back to every single constituent that reached out to me, and so I'm proud 4.5 years later to have accomplished that. The conversations were wide-ranging, but I must say my favorite one was from a constituent reaching out about a real estate project and doing so in poem. The beginning of their email started, "What is the purpose of the plan, our comprehensive direction? Why do you feel the need to vote to consider a correction?" It was extremely interesting to get several outreach from community members, including some in poem. The fifth number is actually 5, and that's new murals adorning the city, particularly in Midtown Row. I always like to see those as sort of a metaphor of local work, that being to take a small and specific and undecorated space and try to make that more vibrant and engaging for all who are near there or who pass by. And the sixth and the final number is 15, and that's 15 years. So 15 years of younger representation that we've got to have in Williamsburg. From 2010 to now almost 2025, we've gotten to be one of those wonky cities where it is possible for a 20-something-year-old to win public office. And I'm so proud to have been able to serve this city. I'm extremely excited for who we have to come in carrying on that legacy. So in looking back like this and in closing, I realized something. I got to start working with the city, as was mentioned, in the economic development internship, afterwards the planning commission, but even before that was the Public Housing Advisory Committee in 2017. So from a full 7 years of experience, what I realize is that our brightest days are ahead. We have hardworking and ambitious city staff making Williamsburg and local governance the gold standard. We have a great council going into next year with an exciting new addition joining. We have more transformative capital projects to break ground and cut the ribbon on. So with all eyes on Williamsburg in 2026, I know this community will be ready. So with our brightest days ahead, to city staff, to council colleagues, to college students and colonial interpreters, to all members of this community that make it such a special place, thank you for the privilege of serving this extraordinary and historic place. Thank you.
You know, Caleb, your closing remarks just remind me of how valuable you've been on city council. You've always been thoughtful, you're productive, you're succinct, more so than I. I just want to express my appreciation for having you serve the residents and serve alongside of me on city council, so thank you. Okay, takes us now to the rest of the agenda. First, we have city council meetings. We have several here that need approval. Are there any changes or recommendations for anything?
No, I move that the minutes from the October 10th business meeting, the November 12th work session, and the November 14th business meeting be approved.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Okay, takes us to public hearings, and we have several, and the first of which is consideration and action regarding PCR number 24-030, a zoning text amendment to Chapter 21, Article 3, Division 11 of the Williamsburg City Code to add temporary buildings and associated temporary structures to facilitate construction to use permitted with special use permits. Ms. Griffin.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons and all the members of City Council. As Mr. Pons has said, the Williamsburg Area Transit Authority has requested an amendment to Section 21-384 of the zoning ordinance. This amendment is to add temporary buildings and associated temporary structures to a special use permit, to require a special use permit in the limited industrial district for no more than 2 years unless otherwise approved by City Council. Currently, temporary structures are allowed as construction trailers and in limited zoning districts as temporary classrooms, or what we like to call temporary cottages, classroom cottages. So the limited industrial district is only on two parcels in the city on Route 60. One is the WADA property at 7239 Pocahontas Trail, and the other one is the gray property shown here that is owned by CW, and it is one of their warehouses. The intent of this district is to encourage light intensity industry uses in low density and well landscape settings. In looking at the comprehensive plan, we do think that this text amendment is compatible to the comprehensive plan. The area here shown in the dark blue is considered public and semi-public. This land use category is generally assigned to institutional buildings, and as a quasi-government entity, this designation is consistent with WADA's organizational structure. Also, we find in Chapter 12 of the comprehensive plan, it is mentioned that WADA will be improving their facility, and this text amendment will facilitate that. And just to give you an overview, City Council approved January 11th, the 2024, a special use permit for WADA to expand their operation there. And then the Planning Commission approved the site plan on December the 20th of 2023. And what has happened is WADA has gone out for bid. They haven't received any bids. And the thought is if they had temporary structures where their employees could be working outside of where their construction would be, they feel like they would get more bids. So that is why they're asking for this zoning text amendment. Staff recommends approval of this amendment, and the Planning Commission at their meeting also recommended approval for a vote of 6-0. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and I do know that WADA staff is here in case you have questions of them.
Thank you. Before I open the public hearing, do you have any questions?
I just have one, Ms. Griffin, just to clarify. So what you were saying is that without the temporary structure, WADA had gone out for a bid for everyone to continue working in the building while the construction and renovation was ongoing.
Yes, that would have been the scenario. The construction would take place while the workers were in the building, and they felt that this may be one of the reasons they did not receive any bids for the construction job.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing. If anybody would like to come forward to speak to the matter, please step forward. Seeing none, I'll close that public hearing and come back to council for consideration. It's pretty easy to me, and if it helps get the job done.
Yeah, and even if they, when Ms. Griffin talked about bids, even if they received bids, I'm sure the price would have been higher than anticipated if they're having to work around staff to make the renovations. I think the other thing that's important too is if this is all inside the gated facility that's not even visible from Route 60. So I'm certainly comfortable with it.
I have no comments.
Neither do I.
Is there a motion to approve?
So I move that City Council approve PCR 24-030.
Second?
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Okay. Next is consideration and action regarding PCR number 24-031, a special use permit to utilize temporary buildings associated with temporary structures necessary to facilitate construction at public transportation and vehicle maintenance facilities.
Yes, so now that council has approved the text amendment to allow temporary structures as special use permit, WADA is now requesting that special use permit. The location is 7239 Pocahontas Trail, it's approximately 13.38 acres, and I've already gone through the fact of the land use designation and the fact that it's in the limited industrial district. Now, the 6 pillars that we use to determine if a special use permit should be approved are as follows. First is the use in harmony with the comprehensive plan, what is the intent and purpose of the zoning district, and if the use will change any of the character of the neighborhood that it's adjacent to. Staff has concluded, as I said before, that it is in harmony with the comprehensive plan. The limited industrial district does allow WADA to operate there, and as the Vice Mayor has said, it is isolated off of Route 60, and you really cannot see it from the road, and we do not feel that it will have any impact on the character of adjacent properties. Here, this just goes over the comprehensive plan, the public and semi-public designation. Here is the limited industrial district shown here. And then the last 3 criteria are if the use is adequately serviced by essential public services. There will be no changes to any infrastructure here. These are temporary facilities, and any use of utilities will tie into what is already existing. It will not result in destruction or loss or damage of any ecological or historic things around the property. And then it is going to be designed, sited, and landscaped not to hinder or discourage development. Again, these are temporary structures. The special use permit is requested for 3 years, and staff and the Planning Commission has recommended approval of this PCR. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Questions before public hearing? Okay. Would anybody like to come forward to speak on this? Seeing none, I'll close that public hearing and come back to council for consideration. Like to make a motion?
Sounds good to me. So I move that City Council approve PCR 24-031.
Second?
McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Aye.
Next on the agenda is a public hearing to consider ARB number 24-097 and ARB number 24-013 to appeal the decision of the Architectural Review Board to deny a request to amend the contributing status of 5 Grove Avenue to non-conforming and to deny the replacement windows. Ms. Griffin.
Yes, so I think the easiest way that everyone can follow this particular appeal is to go through the history, and so that's what I will do with this appeal. On August 29th, the city received an application from Frederick Lum, representative of the owner of 5 Grove Avenue, to replace wood windows from wood to vinyl for consideration at their September 10th meeting. And this is a meeting of the Architectural Review Board. This particular home is located in the Pinecrest subdivision. It has an architectural designation of AP3, and again, it was to remove 2 wooden windows located on the second floor. And here are pictures of the wooden windows. The bottom floor of the home has vinyl windows, and it has, the property owners purchased the property in 2010, and what we have researched is that the vinyl windows were placed on the first floor prior to the owners purchasing the home. We see for as far back as 2009 that the vinyl windows were there. The vinyl windows were not approved by the ARB. Here you have the north side of the window on the second floor. This is a vinyl window that they're requesting to be replaced. And then the middle picture is the south side. And again, the vinyl window, the wooden window is on the top floor, and they're asking to be replaced with the vinyl. The front here, as you see, is the picture of the attic, and there is also a wooden window there. So just to give you a little bit of history, the applicant contacted staff. We gave a recommendation first, and the staff reviewed the request and noted that the board will need to determine if it's appropriate to replace the last remaining windows with vinyl to match the others, or if restoration or replicas should be purchased that matches the original 8x8 painted wood windows. The applicant then contacted staff and questioned the contributing status of the home and the reference to the National Register of Historic Places. The applicant then provided staff with a 2022 architectural survey that was conducted by a third party. And so here you see on the left-hand side the 1992 architectural survey that gives some description. It was a survey done by Fraser and Associates. That particular survey was requested by the city. And it showed that at the time the home was 1 story, it had all wooden windows and wood siding. This 2022 architectural survey was done for a Section 106 review. And I won't get into the requirements of that, but it is done anytime there are federal dollars for a project. And there was a utilities project being conducted in the city and James City County and York County, and so this Section 106 review was conducted by a third party to determine if there was going to be any destruction of historic places. And at that time, by the third party, it was decided that this particular home was not eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. It was, by this time, it was converted to a 1.5-story home. It had vinyl siding. The vinyl siding covered the original wood siding, and all but 3 of the vinyl windows on the home were replaced. Vinyl windows were added, and 3 of the wood windows remained. The original porch was still there, and again, this was conducted by the third party. Staff did not have a copy of this particular survey, and so we contacted DHR to receive the survey and to get some determination of why they said it was eligible. And speaking to DHR, their eligible was referring to their criteria dealing with properties that can be on the Natural Historic Register. And so at that time, the applicant then requested that the building be changed from a designation of contributing to non-contributing. So here you still have, it's same property, but there then became 2 requests. One request was to change the designation from contributing to non-contributing, and then also to remove the 2 windows. If the application was changed from contributing to non-contributing, what would happen is the vinyl windows would then be allowed. In the design review guidelines in the AP3 district, if a building is considered non-contributing, vinyl windows are allowed and can be considered by the ARB. If a building is contributing, it would have to be restored to wood windows. This gives you an overview of the AP3 district and the purpose of the district. It consists of post-World War II colonial revival and more modern style dwellings. There are 4 different AP3 districts in the city. One, of course, is Pinecrest, shown here, Capitol Court, Crispus Attucks, and the Arts and Cultural District. The period of significance of this particular subdivision is from 1869 to 1960, and this date really signifies activities or events that began given the property's historic significance, and oftentimes it is when the first home was built in this particular subdivision, and then that would be 1869. This is considered and also known as a tan yard. It was platted in 1939 on a 12-acre parcel. One of the questions that has been brought up and was considered at the ARB meeting was this idea of historic preservation designations. And it's very important that this is understood, and there was a question by the applicant of this, so I do think it's important to go over. So there are several designations that you can have for historic preservation, and one is federal, and the other is state, and the other is local. I think what needs to be shown here is that the federal designation is by the National Park Service. It's an honorary designation. There is no enforcement. You would want to become under a federal designation if you wanted just to have acknowledged that your particular home or structure had some type of national historic presence. And also there is an opportunity for historic tax credits if your property has a federal designation. Again, there is no enforcement here. There is no requirement of any external changes to be made. It doesn't have to go before ARB, and the standards that are used for that is the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehab. There's also a state designation. This is done by the Virginia Board of Historic Resources. It's also honorary designation. There's no enforcement. There are, if you're wanting to get historic tax credits that are provided, you would also have to follow the Secretary of Interior standards. The local designation is done by a governing body, and that would be the City Council or Board of Supervisors. The local body does have the authority to put historic designations, and that is through law, through our zoning ordinance. Hence, we have our AP1, AP2, AP3, and our CP district in our zoning ordinance, and the body that is in over the enforcement or the regulations of that is through the design review guidelines, and it's the Architectural Review Board that looks at that. We are a certified local government, and that means we have a gold standard when it comes to historic preservation, and we actually have had our design review guidelines reviewed by the Department of Historic Resources, and also we use the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehab. It is possible for a historic district to have a local designation and not a federal or state historic designation, and the local designation has precedence over the federal and the state designation. Two key concepts that's important to go over is the term eligible. We do find that over the state, between the state and federal and local designations, or between the organizations that enforce those designations, that we kind of use the same language. And one of those words is eligible. However, when speaking about eligibility from a state and federal level, it is referring to a structure, place, object, building, or district that meets the criteria to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places and the Virginia Landmark Register. That program is administered by the Virginia State Department of Historic Resources. When you say eligible and you're speaking on the local level, we are talking about local historic neighborhoods like Pinecrest that have the potential to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And then the other term that I think needs to be explained is contributing versus non-contributing. And we've talked about this. This is the first time It's been implemented for a year. The new design guidelines now have contributing and non-contributing. And so we went over that before. I think it's important to go over it again and what that means. The term contributing refers to a building site, a structure or object that adds to the historic association, the historic architectural qualities or archaeological values for which a property is significant. It was present during the period of significance, relates to the significance of the property, and possesses historic integrity, or is capable of yielding information about the period, or it is independently, it meets the National Register criteria. The term non-contributing is the opposite of everything that's contributing. We won't go through that. So the ARB's decision was, the questions they had to ask were the features that were on the building, were they present during the period of significance? And do the alterations, disturbances, additions, or other changes does it continue to possess historic integrity? Does the home continue to possess historic integrity? Or is it capable of yielding important information about the period? So the ARB came to the conclusion that 5 Grove Avenue retained several original materials to include the original wood siding located beneath the vinyl siding. And I should note that this is a practice even recommended by DHR, that if you want to preserve the original wood siding, you can wrap that house in vinyl. It also, the home retained 3 wood windows and a roof structure, except the addition to the roofs made sometime in the past. And then that period of significance. The home was constructed in 1941, and the period of significance for Pinecrest neighborhood is 1890 to 1960. I'm trying to go fast, I'm sorry. So the second was the windows. So with the decision that the home should maintain its contributing status, the decision then for the windows had to be based on contributing structure and not a non-contributing structure. And with that, Chapter 8, page 4 states, existing wood windows should be retained and repaired for contributing buildings located in the AP3. And if restoration is not possible, then copies of the original window matching the existing sash and frames and duplicates should be used. It was asked of the applicant if they were able to restore the windows, and at that time the answer was no. And with that, the decision was made to deny the request. There were vinyl windows that were submitted by the applicant. Those vinyl windows actually did not meet the qualifications. Even if the building was decided to be non-contributing, it did not meet the qualifications of the design review guidelines. Sorry that was long, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and I know that the applicant is here also to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay.
And so is the ARB.
Thank you, and no, that wasn't long. I think
Okay.
there was a lot of good information in there that we needed to digest, so thank you.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions for staff?
Ms. Griffin, could you talk about, so how does a homeowner that, someone, the potential buyer of a property come to Williamsburg, how do they know that they're purchasing, are they made aware that they're purchasing a home that's within, that needs to meet these standards?
Yes, so the state code does not require realtors to disclose that the home is in a historic district. However, just this year, we have made it a practice to quarterly provide postcards to new homeowners. We've received that information from the real estate assessor. We then send postcards that welcome that owner to the city. We, on that postcard, let them know if they are contributing and non-contributing status. We also let them know which district they're in and ask them if they have any questions to contact us. And we also give them a link to our website with the design review guidelines.
And then, can you remind me on the contributing and non-contributing, that was based on, was a new assessment, or that was based on the 1992 survey?
So the 1992 survey did not say specifically whether the building was contributing or non-contributing. It did give values to the integrity when the building was purchased. And then we know that there are certain criteria that we look at for, not we, but in the historic preservation practice that is used to determine if a building is contributing. And one is a period of significance, and another is also what features are on that house that are during the period of architecture. And so here, it's a look at the doors, it's a look at the windows, it's a look at the siding to see if they are still in place.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
So my question is about the period of significance, and just generally speaking, you say this period of significance, I was a little confused because it says the Pinecrest neighborhood period of significance is 1890 to 1960 on one slide, but then another one it says 1869 to 1960 was the tenured Pinecrest subdivision, or Pinecrest neighborhood, and it said 1869 to 1960, but at any rate, so I'm a little confused. Either way, that's a long time, right? That's a long period of time. So if it's something my question is, how is that determined? How is the period of significance actually figured out?
For the Pinecrest, and it should be, I believe it's 1869, so
Okay.
I apologize for that
Okay,
typo.
yeah.
So the Pinecrest, the oldest home there is circa 1869, so that's when the period of significance would have started.
Okay.
And then the 1960 at the time is when the survey was done, when the last home was constructed. Now, there's homes that's been constructed outside of that time.
Okay.
The 1960, I would have to lean on the ARB chair to figure out what happened at 1960 and why it was cut
Okay.
off at that time.
Well, and that's okay, because I think I was even thinking more generally about how a period of significance is determined. So
Okay.
from the date, the year that the first house was
Yes.
platted until,
Sometime in the future, and I don't know specifically for Pinecrest what that 1960
Okay.
represents.
okay. And then for this particular situation, if I understand correctly, the question of eligibility, because as you mentioned, there's different ways that may be defined depending on whether you talk about the national or the state versus the local level. But in this particular situation, the eligibility wasn't really a factor in the decision ultimately as to whether this house was a contributing or non-contributing factor, right? I think something that confused me when I was looking at the materials is there was a lot of discussion about eligibility, but at the end of the day, it actually didn't seem like for this particular house that really was a part of the conversation. It really came down to period of significance and also whether or not there had been alterations that are so significant that it changed the historic integrity of the home. And really the eligibility of any sort of historic nature is really not the issue here.
That is correct.
Okay.
There was a question about eligibility from the applicant, and so we were trying to answer that question.
Okay, that's what I understood. There was kind of a little side quest,
Yes.
as my son would say.
That's
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, and obviously there's always a lot to absorb and try to understand when these projects and requests come before us. So just to go back to Ms. Kern-Shears, question about period of significance, it says 1869 to 1960, but then it says that it wasn't platted until 1939. So does that mean that there may have been one house there that was 1869 and the rest of them were platted in 1939?
Yes, so the oldest house there is 1869.
So it was probably the original, like, farmhouse, and
Yes,
then
ma'am.
all of the rest of them. And in fact, looking on the Grove, it looks like 1930, 41, 41, 50, and then into the 70s.
Yes.
And so when someone, and I think, like you said, that not only are we sending out postcards, but I think on the property information card that's on the city's website, it also states what AP district they're in and whether they're contributing or non-contributing.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes, we implemented that last year, and so you can search online to determine if you're in, like you said, an AP district, and if you're contributing or non-contributing.
And so in this case, since the wood siding is underneath vinyl, if someone went by or was looking to purchase that house, how would they know that there's wood siding underneath?
I guess when I have purchased homes, they do, what do we call it, a review, and you have someone come in.
Surveys.
Thank you, a survey. And they come in and they tell you all about the house. I would think at that time it would be shown. or if someone came in and did some research on the house prior to purchase.
But if you're just looking at it, you wouldn't know.
That is correct.
And the contributing designation, that came within the past few years, I believe. I think we only started having contributing and non-contributing when these design guidelines were approved this year.
That's true. Now, contributing and non-contributing is something that vernacular is used throughout historic preservation, but we started implementing it here with the new design review guidelines.
Okay. And just to clarify, I seem to remember this from a previous case that came before us. Is our role to determine whether ARB made their decision in accordance with the design guidelines, or is our role to decide whether we agree or disagree with the decision?
I'm going to give that to the city attorney.
You are looking at the exact same guidelines as the ARB.
Sorry, what?
You are looking at the exact same guidelines, and so your decision has to be based on the same guidelines that the ARB uses.
So it's based on whether it's in accordance with the guidelines,
Right.
not so much whether we agree
That's right.
with the guidelines.
You are making this decision based on the existing guidelines.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Director Griffin.
Nothing else.
Thank you.
I agree. The thoroughness was helpful there. My questions are more around process.
Yes.
For those extremely involved and have been following along with the process, they might already know the contributing, non-contributing, and your review helped. Could you give us an idea, though, from launching that kind of program and those designations, the amount of appeals that have been brought forward to the ARB from households that have said, from a material standpoint, I'd like to petition for non-contributing status or usage of certain materials?
So this is the first appeal for non-contributing and contributing status.
Okay. All right. Okay, that concludes my questions then. Thank you.
Okay.
Just so I'm clear, the first floor, 11 windows, have vinyl windows in them that were installed without ARB approval and probably without a building permit.
That is true, yes, and prior to the current owners purchasing the property.
So there's 3 windows left on the second floor that have existing or original wood windows, to the best of our knowledge.
That is correct.
They want to replace 2 of them,
Correct.
leaving 1 wood one.
Correct.
Yeah, interesting. All right, any other questions?
I think I have one more question.
Yes.
So if a structure, and this is a general, kind of a big picture question.
Okay.
If a structure is built is determined to be within the period of significance, and that's a critical determination as to a factor as to whether or not a structure is contributing, is really the only way to then not be contributing if you're built within the period of significance, as if there's been such substantial alteration that it no longer has the historic integrity that it once had?
Yes, based on our guidelines, that's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
No other questions? With that, I'll open the public hearing, and if anybody would like to come forward and speak to this matter, please do so. If you just state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Fred Lum. I live at 5 Grove Avenue. All right. Well, this is my first city council meeting, so it's a
Welcome.
pleasure to meet you all, and congratulations, Caleb. I didn't do this in poetry. I wish I had thought of that, but I did not. So I'll just continue on here. I'm here on behalf of the property owner, Courtney Burkett. We are married and have been living at 5 Grove Avenue, which is an owner-occupied property for approximately 14 years. A little bit about our background. We both have master's degrees in historic archaeology from the College of William and Mary and have extensive experience in cultural resource management. I have worked for the Public Archaeology Laboratory in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, the William and Mary Center for Archaeological Research, and the James River Institute for Archaeology. While studying for my master's, I also had a fellowship with the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, where I determined National Register eligibility for a series of historic and prehistoric sites on Colonial Williamsburg property. Courtney is currently the Cultural Resource Manager for Fort Eustis and a registered professional. Much of our careers have been spent determining what is eligible for the National Register and what is not. This is why we were immediately skeptical when the city informed us that we could not replace our windows because it was National Register eligible and contributing status. I'll get to that in a minute. We were able to obtain a copy of the most recent records from our house, and sure enough, a recent survey by a professional CRM firm, that was the one that was referenced earlier, the recent one, the 2022 one, found our house to be specifically ineligible to the National Register of Historic Places. And I submitted a copy of that in my appeal package. I don't know if you got that, but it was in there. So at the planning department's suggestion, we did agree to delay our hearing another week and submit a petition to be removed from contributing status. We filled out the form and, attached the survey, all that stuff. So at the hearing, I asked if anyone on the board was an architectural historian. There is one. However, he had to recuse himself from the proceedings because he's a colleague of my wife. He's a colleague of Courtney's. So that ended that. I also asked anyone in the planning department, if anyone in the planning department, I asked Ms. Griffin was an architectural historian. She replied no. At this point, I realized I'm the only one in the room who's qualified to make these types of determinations. I'm not saying that to brag, I'm just saying it's just kind of a coincidence. So anyway, I presented my case and added additional relevant information about modifications to the house, such as the roof. And I don't know if I explained that. At some point, someone decided to literally raise the back roof and turn it into a 1.5-story structure. So it looks very different on the back side of the house than it does on the front. It definitely changes the character of the house. Okay. So not being individually eligible is listed on the application for filing an appeal to their decision as evidence to be dropped from contributing status, and I was able to prove that. I believe I have proven that our house is ineligible for inclusion on the National Register of Historic Places. The board exhibited, significant confusion about what to do, which is understandable. According to the minutes of the meeting, Ms. Griffin said that page 54, chapter 4 of the guidelines, and that's what we have to go by, refers to individual eligibility due to being built in that specific neighborhood between the 1890s and 1960s. This is incorrect. The chart which she is referring to does have the construction date, but eligibility is based on the National Register of Historic Places and the Virginia Landmarks Register right here. It says Pinecrest neighborhood, eligible for the National Register. Here, it lists our house as eligible for the National Register. That is incorrect. Now, I'll get to why that's significant in a minute. Anyway, so the chart, okay. So in the end, it also said in the staff recommendations that the house is eligible to the National Register. In the end, the chair, Scott Spence, motioned to deny the petition. The other members voted the petition down, and so here we are. At this point, I decided to contact the Department of Historic Resources, and the reason why is because if you have a house and if you're in a district, including like a Pinecrest neighborhood, if that's actually listed on the register, then you are eligible for certain tax incentives and grants to help do exactly these kinds of things. Change windows to wooden, which is more expensive, at least from my research so far. They can give you tax incentives and grants to do those things. And then they kind of surprised me. They came back and told me that no qualified person has ever designated Pinecrest as eligible, despite 2 major surveys. So the entire neighborhood is ineligible for the National Register, or at least after 2 qualified surveys, no one has found it to be so, yet it says that it is in this, for the national, not any local district, the National Register right there. So I had not thought to question that. I had not in my mind would I consider that would be incorrect. So at this point, I knew I needed to file an appeal. Now, the city has claimed that they are considering this property as part of a local historic district, but they do not reference any such district in their guidelines. There are these architectural preservation districts, of which we are in AP3. But they use National Register eligibility to justify subdividing these districts into areas with more restrictions. Only the state can make a determination as to eligibility to the National Register of Historic Places. The only justification they give for separating property is this: no one in the planning department, to my knowledge, is qualified to create historic districts. The justification for presenting National Register information in the guidelines is on the first actual page, right here. And it says that rather the list alerts the Architectural Review Board to the fact that the property has some significance in defining the city's character by representing architectural styles and cultural periods from the city's past, and in specifically that the property contributes to the character of the neighborhood and surrounding area. So basically, if there is a local historic district, I am unaware that this body has created that. I am aware of the Architectural Preservation District, but those are not the same things. And with, this contention from the planning department that just this period between, 18 whatever, even though the neighborhood was platted in the 1930s to the 1960s, is significant, is not based on anything that I have been told. I haven't been convinced of that. I'm not saying I couldn't be, but I have not seen any evidence as to why that is historically significant. So you understand a little bit of my frustration.
Mr. Lum, you've gone 4 minutes over, if you can.
Oh, I'm sorry, I went over. Also,
Give me another minute.
yeah, okay, so anyway, these are the reasons why I have decided to appeal this, because it's not eligible in and of itself, and it doesn't contribute to a district because there is nothing to contribute to. So with that, I'll let you guys discuss that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you allowing me the
Appreciate you
chance to
coming
speak.
forward.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to come forward? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and come back to council for some discussion. It is an intriguing conversation. I think the question of for me, the question of contributing versus non-contributing really is at play. It strikes me that there's been some modifications to the home, particularly the roof line, and some other things, mild things have been made. And just really my opinion, wrapping wood houses with vinyl or aluminum does not preserve wood. Say if you will, but I've renovated 3 of them and it doesn't work. But that leads me to wonder how significant this house is. And so, I am inclined to support removing it from a contributing to a non-contributing home, which is the question here. But I'm willing to listen to my colleagues.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So, yeah, this is obviously a difficult and unique case because we have these fairly new design review guidelines that we approved that designate contributing and non-contributing. And I can certainly appreciate the frustration of a homeowner. I try to put myself in that situation and think if whether they had the proper approval or permits, somewhere along the line, the windows were changed, the roof line was changed. And so to have 3 windows that are now, that need to be replaced or repaired, and you want to look similar to the windows that are already there, it's a challenge. And I guess with all of this, when we were going through these new design review guidelines, one of the challenges for me is if in some situations where this is so restrictive, we're going to have people that are not going to, because it's expensive, they're not going to spend the money to restore these properties, and then we end up with a structure that's not appealing to anyone. So I certainly understand Councilwoman Ramsey's question before is if this was meeting the guidelines as they stand today, but also question in my mind, as the mayor stated, whether this property falls within a contributing or non-contributing structure. And I too would like to hear my colleagues.
Are you sure? Yeah, this is really, there's a lot of detail here, and I think that, for everything that has been said, there's a lot to parse through. But if I also like to always sort of zoom out a little bit before we get too far down in the weeds and be like, okay, we have a homeowner in a house that has vinyl siding with mostly vinyl windows that all face the front and 2 wood windows that don't face the front. And we're in a situation where it looks like then that person cannot put in vinyl windows. And so I'm sort of thinking like, does that make sense? And so there's that bigger picture question that I think it's important to bear in mind, because this is a challenge for homeowners, and we have to have a system that makes sense while also, of course, meeting our priorities of having communities that are well kept, that have, aesthetic that we want to preserve, even if that means we're preserving an aesthetic, not necessarily preserving a structure. And I think that because preserving a structure can be incredibly expensive, and I think we have to be mindful of that. So when I look at the materials and I look at the documents and I look at the guidelines, something that, because I appreciated the question of what are we really reviewing here? Are we reviewing the ARB decision, or are we sort of looking at the guidelines themselves? And it looks like we are, in fact, looking at the guidelines themselves. And, I really do see this period of significance is one, one prong, if you will, of what makes something contributing or non-contributing. And that's something that the homeowner cannot, that just is what it is, and that's designated. And so a house built in the period of significance, like you can't change when a house was built. But then when you look at the second prong, which is, due to alterations, disturbances, additions, or other changes, it no longer possesses historic integrity or is capable of yielding important information about the period. I think that this is where, maybe reasonable minds can differ on a question such as this. But when I look at a house that and I drove by the house today, it's very lovely. When I, look at a house and it's got vinyl, it's been changed to have vinyl siding, even though the wood is still under there, and the windows have been changed, the roof line has been changed such that now there's a half a story that wasn't there before. At what point have there been such alterations that now you have moved into from what would have been contributing to non-contributing? And for me, I look at these changes and think, if this isn't enough, I'm not really sure what would be. And I do note that in the materials, it also says that the logic is that at some point in the future, the original wood siding could be retained, repaired, and restored, and that's on page 23 of the report. And I think, well, that can be done even if something's a non-contributing house. Somebody could come and restore the home, even if it's not contributing, and I hope that people, would do that, because that would be great. So I don't really see how we can say, well, because the wood is still there, then that is, and it could potentially be restored in the future, therefore we should keep it necessarily as contributing based on the logic that somebody might change it in the future. So where I am landing with this is really that I think, in my judgment, there has been such alterations to this home such that moving it from contributing to non-contributing is absolutely supportable under the guidelines. It would not lead to an absurd result where we have a vinyl house where we're not allowing somebody to put in vinyl windows.
Ms. Ramsey?
Thank you. And I would sort of like to piggyback on a few things Ms. Kernschier said, partially because of the street that I live on, which has a lot of contributing and non-contributing houses, many that go back to 1920. And there's one in particular that has wood siding, and I think it has wood windows, but it's non-contributing. And I asked the question, well, why is this one non-contributing? And it was because it had some modifications made to it to change sort of the original design, size, structure, whatever. And so taking that into account and then looking at this one where, to your point, an additional floor was added, half a floor and vinyl, and even though there's wood underneath, I doubt seriously that someone, if they haven't already taken that vinyl off to preserve it, is going to do so, particularly if it already has a number of wood windows. I think one thing we do have to consider, though, is that this is the first year that we've had contributing and non-contributing. And when we look at, I mean, this is a page and a half just in one neighborhood. And I think that the number of houses that have been reviewed, that it's very hard to know exactly how all of these things are going to work out once we start looking at particulars. And I give a lot of credit to planning, to ARB for looking at all of the houses in these districts and categorizing them contributing and non-contributing, and allowing the opportunity for a homeowner to come in and discuss their reasons for why it should be one way or the other. And I think that, in my view, if this house is decided to be non-contributing in our, as I say, point of view, that is just one out of many, and that the standards for all of the others are still there and a very good basis for anyone who's looking at design guidelines going forward. So that's my thoughts.
Rogers?
Oh, one other thing, sorry.
Hold that.
Sorry. The other thing I would say, though, is that if it is determined by this board not to be contributing, I do feel that any windows that are put in there should meet the standards of ARB, because one of the key things that was done was to have a higher level of materials, particularly vinyl windows, vinyl siding, and I would agree that anything that is included other than wood should be of the standard meeting the ARB design guidelines. My thoughts.
All very fair thoughts and a good discussion, despite it being a discussion, and I'm sure for the homeowner having been somewhat of a headache. In a way, I'm almost happy that we're here, because the idea pre-contributing, non-contributing was, as a homeowner, you would have less in the ways of materials that you could use on your house or allowances for changes in designation to your house. So this is sort of along the process of the purpose of that contributing and non-contributing. So I'm glad to have seen the first case in that way. Overall, I'm in agreement with, it sounds like, where the colleagues of mine are facing, which is that the house, despite being labeled as contributing, is, for that being a designation of age and historical precedence and location, certainly qualifying some of those, but not all, given the changes in the house since it was originally created. And when I think about the two different designations that we made, one of the areas I know too on contributing was the location of the home and how frequently it might be seen from travelers or from neighbors. I know that the Grove area is even off of Page Street, which itself is off of the entrance corridor of Capitol Landing Road, not one that someone new to the city may drive by very much, and in that way, there should be a greater allowance for flexibility in the materials of that home to modernize, and while still maintaining the more historic look of the home, save some of the costs that were mentioned in needing to maintain older materials, which came up regularly in the design review guidelines process, particular to windows. So with that, with the location, with the changes in roof structure and off the back, the addition of half a story, and then just this homeowner having the vinyl siding added over the roof, I'm more in favor of allowing the designation to change from contributing to non-contributing.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, so I think we're all in an agreement that changing the designation to non-contributing is important. But, I also want to state that the work that we've done to get to this point of contributing and non-contributing and the use of additional newer materials has come a long way. And so I'd like to applaud ARB for their consideration of this application. By no means that us disagreeing with you is a sign of disrespect in any way. So with that, I would also agree that, and I don't know what windows the owners is thinking about, but should be, I guess, just a question for the attorney. If we do decide that it's non-contributing, independent of the question of the windows, would the applicant have to go back to ARB to get approval for any subsequent window?
So if it's non-contributing, I think that's actually a better question for Tavia than it is for me.
The answer is yes. The windows that have been requested do not meet the standards for vinyl windows for the AP3 district, and so they would have to come back before the ARB with qualified windows.
So to the motion here, would we have to do something separate for contributing, non-contributing, and windows?
So I think your motion would be that you find that the house is not a contributing structure, which is what I think I hear you saying, and that it's remanded back to the ARB for future decision based on the windows that need to be put in on that decision.
Okay, good.
But it would, if we make the change from contributing to non-contributing, it would be up to the applicant to decide to go back to the
That's right.
ARB with the proper vinyl standard
right.
windows for that. So we wouldn't send it back to the ARB, it would be the applicant's.
Well, so there aren't windows in front of city council that are,
Right.
that meet the guidelines, but you're essentially acting as an appeal board here, so it's got to go back to the ARB. The applicant can choose to apply with new windows or move forward based on the decision that you've made with the windows that he has, and then they will utilize the guidelines to determine if that's appropriate.
Like to try to shot at the motion?
So do I need to reference the chapter and zoning and all of that?
I think so.
I think your motion can be that you find that the property is not a contributing structure and that the matter is referred back to the ARB for any future decision based on that finding.
So moved.
Does that satisfy you, Ms.
I think
Michelle?
that's,
Second?
Second. Okay,
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kern Chair.
Aye.
Next is consideration and action regarding proposed deed of non-exclusive easement to Child Development Resources for the sole purpose of installation of a compost soil amended CSA filter strip in a bio-retention area emergency spillway located at 312A Waller Mill Road in York County. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons, members of council. As you may be aware, Child Development Resources is a nonprofit organization within the historic Triangle area, and they are focused on training for youth and families, providing services for youth and families. In, I believe, September of this year, on property located on Waller Mill Road, 312 Waller Mill Road, they broke ground on some modifications that they were hoping to make to the historic Triangle Mesmer Community Services Center, which included updating the building and also adding on a section to that building. Also, that property borders city property located at 312A Waller Mill Road, and the CDR approached the city to allow for the installation, or a grant of an easement to allow the installation of these stormwater maintenance mechanisms. And I am not a BMP expert, but our retired city engineer, Mr. Small, reviewed this and determined it to be mutually beneficial to the city and to CDR As you can see in the packet on the agenda, there's a plat with the dimensions and all the area that would be covered by these stormwater maintenance installations. So at this point, city staff would request that council approve the execution of the easement and grant that to CDR for their property, or for the city property, to assist with stormwater maintenance at the adjoining line.
Any questions?
No questions.
None for me. Thank you.
I'll open the public hearing if anybody would like to come forward to speak to this. Let the city manager had something to say. I'll close the public hearing and come back to council for discussion and consideration, and I'll just kick off that based on the report of what's being proposed and that there's no harm being done to city property, I think it serves a greater benefit.
Sorry, did you open a public hearing?
Yep.
Yep, okay.
I would agree. I like the word mutually beneficial.
I agree. No question.
Ms. Shelton, I had done the public hearing.
I was reading and paying attention, sorry.
That's all right. Just wanted to make sure we're all good, because sometimes I forget. Okay, would somebody like to make a motion?
So I move that City Council approve the deed of easement for Child Development Resources and authorize the city manager to execute the attached proposed deed of non-exclusive easement with CDR for purposes of stormwater maintenance.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kern Chair.
Aye.
Okay, that takes us now to reports, and first is the monthly financial statement. Ms. Dameron, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of City Council. I do have a presentation, but before I get into that, I want to mention that the full financial report's in the agenda packet, and if you look at that, you may think that the property taxes look a little different, and that is because we discovered a glitch doing the report, and the glitch was that delinquent taxes are reported as current and current are reported as delinquent. Now, we are in the process of fixing that problem. The December report will show it correctly, and I also want to note that that only is an impact to our general ledger, meaning the individual accounts are reported correctly. So if a person or company paid their taxes by the due date or within the grace period, they were correctly reported as current and will not incur any penalty. It had nothing to do with that. It was just how it got posted in our ledger. And so while I will not be presenting a slide on property taxes until after the due date and we have the December report, I will note that the collections during November performed well compared to budget expectations for this point in time. And if you compare those property taxes, delinquent and current as a total, the amount is correct. It was just a problem in how it got posted. And with that, I'll turn our attention to the report. And on this first slide, we see our room, meals, and sales tax. The room and meals is reported in the general fund, which is the city's operating fund. Sales tax is reported in the city's capital improvement fund. Both room and meals have increased in November compared to November of 2023. Rooms increased by $45,000 or 3.3%. And meals tax increased by $141,000 or 4.6%.3%. Sales tax decreased by $33,000 or 2.2% compared to November of 2003. And then this next slide shows revenue trends for the $2 lodging tax and the historic sales tax, both of which are reported in the tourism fund. The $2 lodging tax reported in November increased by $19,000 or 5.5% compared to November 2023, while the historic sales tax decreased by $71,000 or 10%. And then also included in your packet is a line graph. We've talked about this line graph before, so I'm not going to present on it, but just wanted to note that graph shows the sales tax, room, meals, $2 lodging from fiscal 2019 to the 2024 estimated unaudited. And I will note with that as of yesterday late, I received a draft of our audit financial report. That's still under the review process. There's a whole process once the managing auditor has signed off on that report that it goes through. And in addition to that, we will start drafting our transmittal, our management and discussion analysis, as well as the statistics now that we have what we believe will be final numbers. And so we will look forward to presenting that soon to the audit committee as well as to City Council. And that concludes my remarks. I'd be happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Dameron. I don't have any questions.
Questions? Thank you.
None for me.
Neither do I. Thank you, Director.
Thank you. Okay, I believe we don't have any monthly departmental operating reports. Is that correct, Mr. Trivette?
Skip that this month and
Okay,
try to move on so we can get to the state of the city.
all right. That means your report's going to be brief?
None this month.
Nothing.
Shelton? Okay, thank you. This takes us now to open forum, which is an opportunity for anybody to come forward, like to speak to council. Yes, sir. We know you are Mr. Lum, but if you just state your name and address for the record,
Of course.
just 5 minutes.
Fred Lum, 5 Grove Avenue. All right, the only thing I just want to touch on is something that was briefly brought up before. It doesn't have anything to do with my specific applications. It's just how we found out that we were in an architectural preservation district. We were not informed when we purchased the house about any of that. And I mentioned this to the ARB as well, but I figured since I'm here, may as well tell you guys that too. We found out, I think it might have been well over a year later, we got a letter talking about something that a neighbor wanted to do to their house, and that's been the policy for a while. If your neighbor wants to do something, they'll let you know. And so we're like, what's this? And then we did some research and we've kind of pieced together, we're like, oh, okay. So it's a good thing we knew, because very shortly afterwards, we needed to replace our doors. And we went to the ARB for approval, and that was granted, and no problems there. So it was good that we knew that before, because if not, we would have just done it, and then we would have been in trouble. And it was mentioned, that the previous owners may or may not have made alterations without getting permission. They may not have known that they needed it. And so, yes, I do appreciate the planning department's plan to give postcards. I think that's a good idea, and that's probably about all they can do. And I do know if you really want to be resourceful, you can find it on the public information, the website that you mentioned, Ms. Ramsey. But, we weren't that resourceful before we bought the house. So I'd like the city council to maybe consider passing an ordinance that would require homeowners to disclose to the people who purchase their homes that they are in an architectural preservation district. Because, as you've probably noticed, it is easy to step in it, like you can end up, and especially in a house that's a little on the older side, it may need a lot of repairs very quickly. So you might have to start doing these things before you get that postcard, and then all of a sudden you get a stop work order, and you're like, oh no. So we would have appreciated it if we had known before we had bought the house. So that's just my 2 cents on that. That's all. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Lum.
Oh, one more thing. I was able to return the windows, so I would have had to start over again anyway. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good luck moving forward. Would anybody else like to come forward? Seeing none, I'll close the open forum and go to unfinished business, of which there's none. Takes us to new business, which there are some. First is consideration and appointments to boards and commission members. Do we have any, Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yes. I move to appoint Robert Yule to the Board of Building Code Appeals for a 5-year term expiring December 31, 2029. Reappoint Robert Lane to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a 5-year term expiring December 31, 2029. Appoint Elaine Macbeth to the Economic Development Authority to fill an unexpired term expiring June 30, 2028. Reappoint Ronald Kirkland and Cash Earhart to the Tourism Development Grant Review Committee for a 2-year term expiring December 31, 2026.
Second?
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Item B is consideration of proposed resolution 24-22 to recommend Thomas Towler for appointment to the Board of Equalization. Ms. Shelton?
As you know, the court makes this appointment and city council makes a recommendation to the court. The resolution is for purposes of filing that petition.
So we have the resolution. Would somebody like to make that motion?
So I move that city council adopt resolution 24-22.
Second.
Okay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey? Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire?
Aye.
Next is consideration and action regarding a tourism promotion contingency fund request for outdoor vendor payment processing Wi-Fi network for Williamsburg downtown. Ms. Skrabala, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons, members of City Council. I'm here to present a Tourism Promotion Contingency Fund request from Williamsburg Downtown for the purchase and implementation of an outdoor vendor payment processing Wi-Fi network specifically for events located downtown. I want to acknowledge that there was a recent TPCF request at last month's meeting, so I won't go too deep into the background here. But just as you see here before you, shows the purpose, which is starting or providing startup funding for new events and activities or funding to expand existing programs, all of which must promote an increase in overnight visitation. This year's program budget is $150,000, of which $50,000 was awarded last month to Colonial Williamsburg. The request before you today is for $4,030 for the purchase of the outdoor vendor payment processing Wi-Fi network, as previously mentioned. Williamsburg Downtown will work with existing businesses to leverage a Wi-Fi mesh network across the downtown area for events. Williamsburg Downtown consulted Colonial Technology, who provided the quote for the equipment and labor and Wi-Fi internet service, as outlined before you. In addition to Williamsburg Downtown's own events, the network could benefit other popular events like Second Sundays, Williamsburg Live, and Occasion for the Arts. Staff's recommendation is to award the request for just over $4,000, $4,030 for the network. It is a fairly nominal amount that could really benefit the patrons and businesses downtown. So there is a representative here, Ben Munson, from Williamsburg Downtown, if you have any other questions that I may not be able to answer.
Well, I don't have any questions. I think if we can spend a little bit of money to help others spend a lot of money, I think it behooves us to do that. And I think you think about the constraints that not having Wi-Fi downtown offers. It can be burdensome, particularly for those vendors who are trying to make transactions, of which we hope there are many. So I certainly support this. Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, I do as well. I think I imagine it's pretty frustrating to try to move patrons through and having problems with Wi-Fi connections. So I think it's certainly, as you pointed out, a nominal amount to really gain some benefit from it.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a great way to support downtown businesses and our local vendors, so I think it's great.
I do too. I just have one question. What is the expected range for this? So when we talk about, Occasion for the Arts is pretty much right there on, Merchant Square, and then Williamsburg Live's over on the Art Museum, so.
I see Mr. Munson coming forward. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, figured I'd jump in on that if I could. Yeah, this is kind of really just a pilot project, thus the nominal grant request here. Basically, what we're doing is taking a landline Wi-Fi signal from the Williamsburg downtown office on North Boundary Street, and we're simply repeating that signal across a couple of, effectively like a mobile router, so they kind of repeat up and down the street. Colonial Computers has been kind enough to kind of lend us the equipment before we get the financing to kind of test it, so we have some real-world trials. So we actually have put it into practice for 2 Second Sunday events at this point. And it's worked fairly well. We did learn real quick that the Wi-Fi that we have at the office is not really sufficient, so we are going to be upgrading to a fiber optic, high bandwidth, kind of gigabit internet to provide the backbone for that. But at this point, fiber is forthcoming on North Boundary Street. So as soon as that comes, we'll be upgrading our connectivity. To answer your question directly on the range, each repeater will go about a block, and we've just got about 5 of them, right? So we are able to service Prince George Street and then running up North Boundary up to just about where the library and the community building are. We probably could use an extra connectivity point or two to really well serve the footprint of Second Sundays. I have talked to Steve Rose about like the Christmas market and things like that. Steve Rose and some individual vendors from Second Sundays have kind of resigned themselves to paying for Starlink and then like having the booth next to them, use their password. But I do think that this little pilot has proven very successful. With the limited bandwidth that we have, there is a capacity to limit people's access. So I did notice one vendor streaming a football game while things were happening, and so, connectivity lagged further down. But, it could be spread over at least a dozen blocks, with the current hardware, I'd say probably five blocks in a linear shot, four blocks in a linear shot. But I think it kind of proved the concept. And we may end up kind of writing an additional grant to compensate for the increased bandwidth we need, or, I think we'll be exploring with other events and other folks at the city if there's need for something broader here. I do think there might be some interesting possibilities for longer-term solutions. I'm sure you've noticed during Second Sundays or other major events, the cell connection is almost dead. You can't even pull up your email or a Facebook page. So we have limited this as a login-only vendor Wi-Fi network, because having 3,000 people on it would just absolutely destroy it as it is. But it works well for the vendors. So the intent was really, after I had several vendors come into my office on Prince George Street and beg me to use my Wi-Fi because they couldn't process payments on their mobile devices, because they all take credit cards on Square and mobile devices. That really kind of highlighted the need, and it does seem to be addressing it fairly well in this kind of pilot phase. But I think we've got a good foundation to grow something nice here.
So a vendor can only tap into it if they're given the proper credentials then?
Yeah, yep.
Thank
So the event coordinator, Shirley Vermillion, had kind of emailed all the vendors and said, hey, here's the password, here's the network name, start kicking it around, see if it works. And it has solved a lot of problems for a lot of vendors. And I think we may need to grow what we're doing a little bit, but this little seed fund to test the pilot I think will serve us well.
I think it's important to note that this is likely a short-term fix through downtown Williamsburg, because the IT department and the city itself is looking at a much broader solution to downtown Wi-Fi with a carrier partner. And we hope to have that implemented maybe within a year or so. So this is probably a short-term problem that we're fixing with a fairly minor investment.
Yep. Happy to brainstorm on that too.
Thank you.
Well, it strikes me we start to recoup that investment immediately with more transactions digitally coming into the city, but also happier vendors, customers. I know, Ben, we met a couple months back, talked about a number of things.
Yeah.
This was one of them, is one of the chief areas that someone who loves their craft just finds troublesome with Second Sundays. They can't actually get someone to pay for that craft.
Yeah.
So happy to support it.
Great, thank you.
Like to make a motion?
So I move that City Council award $4,030 from the Tourism Promotion Contingency Fund to Williamsburg Downtown for the purchase of an outdoor vendor payment processing Wi-Fi network.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Aye.
All right, next is consideration and action regarding proposed resolution 24-23, amending the budget for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025. Welcome back, Ms. Dameron.
Thank you. This is appropriating some funds. The registrar received $16,230 in a grant from the Department of Elections for voting equipment and supplies. We've also received 2 donations totaling $3,724 for a memorial bench at Waller Mill. And in addition, we're asking for a transfer of $175,000 of the remaining funds or surplus funds from the Francis Street project to the Capitol Landing Road Outfall and Stream Restoration Project. If you'll recall, last month you approved a contract for that, and I believe the Director of Public Works and Utilities mentioned that how this would be funded. And in addition, the repaving came in a little higher, and we're asking to transfer $100,000 from the Historic Street project to the roof paving project. So we request that these appropriations as well as the transfer be approved so that the funds can be spent and the projects can continue.
Questions, Mr. Vice Mayor?
So I move that City Council approve Resolution 24-23, amending the FY25 adopted budget to appropriate grant funds, donations, and approve necessary transfers of funds.
Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Kerntier. Dusty?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Aye.
All right. Next is consideration and action regarding proposed resolution 24-24 to increase the full-time equivalent position. Mr. Trivette.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So this is an item, and it's something that we don't normally do, and something we don't look to do, certainly, is add positions mid-budget year. But there are 2 opportunities that we don't want to miss for greater efficiency. The first one is in the finance department to create a position that we're right now calling the audit director. If you look at the finance department's operating schedule, they essentially spend 6 months working on the budget, then they spend 6 months working on the audit. And if everything goes as planned, there might be a month between those 2 major tasks. And because our finance department is still relatively small, it consumes a lot of bandwidth of the whole department. And that does not leave a lot of time to deal with other administrative tasks, such as dealing with RFPs for services, monitoring credit card usage, all of those things. In addition to that, consistently, our auditors have recommended adding staff in the finance department so that we have redundancy in the services they provide, so that if a person is out or somehow leaves their job, we're not left with a hole that is very difficult to fill with a very small staff. So as Ms. Dameron and I talked about ways of creating greater flexibility in our work schedule, and hopefully relieving a little bit of stress associated with those 2 high task priorities, creating this position of an audit director would put somebody under Ms. Dameron's supervision who is solely responsible for making sure that audit is reviewed, delivered on time. I think I was speaking to some of the other CAOs earlier this week about this particular issue, and they all agreed this is a major challenge because the requirements that are being placed on us by the GFOA and other regulatory bodies for audits have just grown and grown and grown. And the amount of time spent in records, looking at fixed assets and software agreements and all kinds of contractual relationships that used to not be such an integral part of the reporting are now very important and take months and months and months of evaluation to make sure it's accurate and reported correctly. So that's another reason for us to pursue this. So we're asking City Council to allow us to add that FTE today. If you do, we will advertise it. I'm sure we'll get a great selection of candidates and be able to add somebody to the staff that will help us deliver that audit much easier next year. The timing is great, considering we're just wrapping one up, so the new person will come in and start with the fresh audit immediately, and I think that's exciting. And then the second opportunity is to add a position in the city manager's office, And this one is an FTE that we're currently calling Special Projects Administrator. And this is really born out of the fact that the HTRFA is probably past ready to hire an executive director to help handle the daily business of the HTRFA. And that includes primarily at this point managing contracts, overseeing construction projects, and helping the board put together agenda items, evaluate stuff from legal, all of those things. Basically keep their finger on the pulse of the things that are moving forward with the HTRFA. The HTRFA has a number of ways they could do that. They could have hired this person directly to work for the board. It is an independent authority. They have a dedicated revenue source, so as long as it's within their budget, they could have voted to do that. The CAOs discussed it and agreed that the normal practice for a shared body like that to date has been that to try and save cost, one of the three participating localities takes on the burden of the human resources component of the authority and the finance component. To date, that has been the city of Williamsburg. We serve as their fiscal agent, and there's a lot of synergy in what we're doing that allows that to happen. And so the CAOs agreed that that would be appropriate for this position as well. And so the opportunity is there for us to create this special project administrator as an FD in the city manager's office, whose primary function will be to serve as the HTRFA executive director. The benefit of that is that the HTRFA will reimburse us the cost of the salary at the end of the day. Now, one of the things it also gives us the opportunity to do as a city is recognize that as the HTRFA is growing into its role, this executive director position may not end up being a full-time job. And if that's the case, can we use that special project administrator's expertise on city projects as well? And the answer is yes, we can. As that happens, the city would supplement the salary and reduce the amount that we're taking from the HTRFA related to that salary. So this is sort of a creative solution that I hope generates some efficiencies for very little cost to the city and opens up a great big window of opportunity. When we advertise the position, we'll be advertising it with a scope of work that's already been written and approved by the HTRFA board regarding the executive director's responsibilities. We'll be adding to that some more generic language regarding construction project management and contract oversight so that we could use this person's expertise in those fields on city projects moving forward. And if you think about the list of things that are being considered, if they're approved, then this would certainly, hopefully, reduce our costs for future engagements for construction management. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunity that we have before us. So the request is from the staff that you approve these two mid-year FTE additions.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. So as it relates to the audit position, and I'm glad you pointed out, as I serve on the Finance Committee, we do hear annually that our Finance Department is taxed, and that's particularly true when you consider all of the new regulations that come down through the IRS and different agencies that require different protocols to be adhered to, and it's an onerous thing, and so I think separating those duties would certainly provide some efficiency and some relief to that audit position, to that office, and so I do support that. And with the next position related to the HTRFA, I think as you described it, it is common that these authorities have employees, and use a comparison. Talking with the CAOs, these positions are often positions held at municipalities, just like we have a joint library system, and those employees aren't employees of the library, they're actually employees of James City County. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I think this would fall into that same category. The benefit is that HTRFA is paying for it. Now, you mentioned they're paying for the salary. Does that include benefits?
Yes, it would. Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, it gets a little complicated if we start adding city responsibilities, and that's when we start to back down what the HTRFA is reimbursing of the total. Won't change the salary of the role, but it would, we would start to share in the cost.
Yeah, and obviously we'll develop a process that will see that through.
And we already do that with many positions in the city that are jointly funded. We do a cost allocation.
Okay, so I certainly support both of these, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Trivette. So, as you mentioned early in the presentation, it's not typical to request positions in mid-year. And from the outside looking in, these look like two pretty significant starting salaries. So, could you talk a little bit about how it's funded in mid-year, and then how you arrive at a salary for the two positions?
Certainly. So the funding, is relatively simple. One of the things the city does not do, and it's really best practice in my opinion, is we don't budget for attrition. And so during the year, as we have vacancies in positions, it creates a surplus in our salary lines in every one of the budgets. And that gives us a little bit of flexibility. That would be our first source to draw from. Ultimately, the reserve is there for just this reason. If a need arises, we can address it during the year. So that's another source of funds. As to how we set the salary, what we do is the Human Resources Director does basically a survey of localities that have similar positions. In many cases, we find those positions in localities that are similar to us. Obviously, one of the localities that is really similar to us is Radford. And it's similar to us in all kinds of ways, except for the fact that it's not in Hampton Roads. So once you get that information on similar positions, then those numbers have to be right-sized for where we are in our pay scale. And so that's how we arrive at the number.
And then, I know you talked about with the HTRFA position, executive director, that might at some point may become part-time. Would you envision the other half of that 50% being part-time? I mean, right now we're under, we've got a lot of projects going on, but at some point that position would be part-time as well from a project administrator?
Yes, I mean, yes. One of the things that we've wrestled with the HTRFA, and the thing that's kept us from hiring an executive director for this long, is every time we talk about it, we get hung up on what the role is right now versus what the role will be, and what the requirement is in terms of time right now versus what the requirement might be in the future. And I think that makes the position kind of challenging to hire. It actually gives me great comfort in the fact that this could be a city position with us having the ability to put some responsibility over there that's city funded, so that if it does turn out not to be a full-time job, we are using it to its maximum capability. And so I think in an ideal scenario, I hope it does work out to be about a 50-50 split. I think that would be best for HTRFA and certainly best for us. And like with any job, you start the day with a plan, and that changes. And so I think that if you sit back and look at this person's job on a daily basis, it'll be hard for them to say, well, I spent 50% of the time doing this, 50% of the time doing that. And at the end of the year, though, it will work out to that shared percentage. That's the purpose of the cost allocation.
Okay. Then also on that position, it was brought to City Council's attention that it wasn't on the agenda for HTRFA that there was or in the minutes that there was some agreement to fund this position. But, I mean, you've told us they agreed to fund it.
We've discussed this for, over a year, this possibility. We actually almost did a contract position and then ultimately decided not to. We talked with candidates, and the HTRFA board directed us to proceed in this fashion.
Okay. And then the last question is, do you see any impact, because during our GIO's retreat from the department heads, there were about 22 positions that were on the table when you added them all up. Do you see this having any impact on consideration for those positions as you move forward in the budget preparation?
It will, yes. I mean, it will be much less because the HTRFA is paying a component of it, but, everything that we spend money on is a factor in what we have money to spend, what money is left to spend on. And so I think that by the time we get to March, when I publish my proposed budget, hopefully this position has been hired. We know exactly what the candidates' expertise are, which is also part of what we are going to be able to assign to it. And then we will know what the split might be going into the new fiscal year. And that would determine how much money we need to allocate from the money that we have available to create new positions. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions. Well, the comment about with the audit director, I think it makes good sense. And yeah, it is mid-year, but not mid-year when it comes to the audit. So I appreciate that, this person will be able to start on the ground floor with the next cycle. So I think that's good news. Now, with the HTRFA, is it envisioned that to start with, this person would be 100% HTRFA to start, and then we see what happens going forward? Okay.
Well, and again, how we use this position is largely going to depend on whether we're successful in recruitment of the right person to do what the city also needs.
I see.
Because the city doesn't need an executive director. And so if we only get applicants with a skill set for that, but not construction management, then I don't know that the city would ever be able to use the position.
I see.
If we get that hybrid unicorn, is a popular term these days, candidate that can do a lot of tasks well, then there might be some synergy there. So that's why I say this, I like this plan because it gives us that flexibility without necessarily marrying us to that plan.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. And you said that the scope of work has been approved by the HTRFA, but in terms of like the next steps, if after our action today, if we approve this, then what's the next step in the process?
Sure. We will advertise the position probably after the first of the year, and begin the candidate process, do the reviews, evaluation committee, which will include some of the HTRFA board members. And then once a candidate is selected, we would hire them. It will use it, because it's a city position, we'll use the city standard process for hiring, which is a fairly comprehensive interview process for the folks in the room that have gone through it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you for the explanation and answers to the other questions. I only have a couple. When we talk about mid-year, actually, it's like 3/4 of the year when we would actually start paying someone for the position. So,
That's a
so
good
it's
point.
not as if we have 6 months of extra pay, more like 3. And as far as HTRFA, so they would start with like 100%, but, we're only looking at the sports center now, but that's not the only game in town, hopefully. So this same person would be able to take on the roles both for construction management and working with the live performance venue and anything else that would come there. And then when you're talking about someone with the right skill set that might be able to help with city projects, would that include like the new library?
Yes, right, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, it's a growing need in the city in terms of supervising construction projects that are not utilities or pavement. And that would be the expertise we're looking for.
Children's Park.
Right.
The children's park.
I am.
I had the same questions on distribution of work, pre-post, ribbon cutting for sports complex, but those have been asked. Let me just ask, so if we don't get the unicorn, which are notoriously rare, is it then just going to be a part-time position to see through the sports complex before that contract would not be renewed?
So I think that's the adjustment that's tricky, is what happens as the HTRFA's business changes, right? As we move from construction to just oversight. And what's interesting to me is the fact that the skill set associated with a contract or construction manager is the same. It's contract management, right? You've got a contract, making sure that the person that you hired to follow that contract is doing everything in the contract and doing it to the board's satisfaction. So I think in terms of the person that gets hired, even in that transition, I don't know that the need for who we have changes. But I do think there's going to be this constant evaluation of, is this a full-time role or not under the HTRFA? And it's just too early to be certain about it.
Okay. And what if HTRFA now seeks the executive director, even if it's not the bifurcated 50-50 part special projects, Williamsburg, part sports complex? Do you feel that the applicant pool for even someone strictly focused on the authority would be there?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the skill set we're looking for an executive director is largely contract management. And that's almost 100% of the job. The secondary skill is the political part of it, of presenting to a body like the city council, meeting with the CAOs on a regular basis. One of the things that I don't have time to do that I think the mayor does very well is preparing for a meeting, speaking to each member of the city council and talking through what's on the agenda. I don't have the time to do that with each member of the HDRFA board. An executive director should and would. And so, in many ways, this person is going to hopefully make the HDRFA's business move a bit more faster.
Okay, all right, understand. Thank you.
Good. Any other questions? Is there a motion?
So I move that City Council authorize the addition of 2 FTEs as described and amend the FY25 budget to appropriate funding for these positions.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Aye.
Okay. Item F is consideration and adoption of Resolution 24-25, establishing the 2025 City of Williamsburg legislative agenda.
Thank you,
Mr. Witt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Your legislative agenda happens annually ahead of the General Assembly session, which will convene in January. And you reviewed at your work session last month items that we had gathered through our normal process. Nothing has changed except you had a last-minute request. It happened after this agenda packet was published last Friday at your joint meeting with the school board and James City County Board of Supervisors. The school board requested that the city include a statement supporting state funding for construction, capital improvements for pre-K through 12 school buildings. So that is now on the table for you to add if you wish, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good, thank you. We did have a good conversation about this, and I know we've met with our legislative folks from the General Assembly. Seems like our agenda so far has been pretty well received, and we did talk a lot about the information that Mr. Witt just offered, and I think that's something we should probably include in our agenda.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think we need to add the school funding.
Yes.
I agree, and does it have to be limited to construction funding, or can it be a little broader in case the governor has largesse for
Absolutely.
other educational funding?
Absolutely. I think that would be wise. The specific request from the school board was just for the construction funding, but I think added funds from the state for all elements of education would be welcome, so we can make it that broad.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and for reference, the chair of the WJCC School Board, Ms. Ortego, emailed us
Right.
today and included that this idea of adding to our legislative agenda, seeking grants would go because the governor's announced an additional $290 million to boost school construction. So this is Williamsburg, our school system, trying to position ourselves to be available for some of that funding.
Yeah, so let's add this request, but then also offer or put in the agenda that we support any funding for things related to school education.
Great.
Yeah, because I think it talked about in our joint meeting, there was already, as
Right.
Councilman Rogers pointed out, there's already funding available for the school construction projects.
So with those changes, if everybody's okay with that, is there a motion to approve?
So I move that City Council adopt Resolution 24-25 as presented, with the modifications discussed.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kerntier?
Aye.
Item G is consideration and action to approve the African American Heritage Trail narrative. Mr. Witt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. You heard a wonderful presentation about this narrative at your Monday work session. The advisory committee, who consist of, I want to name the members. They've done they're doing a fantastic job. Jody Allen, Robert Bobby Braxton, who's with us today, and it's his birthday.
Birthday?
Janice Canaday, Connie Matthews Harshaw, Preston Jones, and Johnette Gordon Weaver have served as or continue to serve as your advisory committee. We've been working on public input for this project since March of 2023, and it culminated this early fall with Share More Stories and JMI our consultant out of Richmond, gathering more than 50 personal stories from the community to inform this narrative. So the advisory committee and staff are thrilled to have this narrative on your agenda for approval today.
Well, I think we all saw the presentation on Monday and can't but help think of how wonderful this is going to be for the city, and certainly, as you point out, to all the committee members for their hard work. I think we're building towards something that will be a national treasure, quite honestly. So I certainly support moving forward.
Yeah, this is definitely start of something great, and thanks to all the committee members and more importantly for the folks that shared all of their stories. And as I said on Monday after the presentation, having attended the updates in some of the work sessions, it was definitely stood out to me that JMI was the right consultant for this project. Their passion was evident, and how things changed from the first meeting to some folks being skeptical, to being at the last update where the whole narrative has been really well received by everyone involved. So it's really exciting to move it forward.
Yes, I agree. That was a really fantastic presentation on Monday, and I'm very grateful to everyone who has been a part of this and continues to be a part of this and will continue to be a part of this endeavor. That's really important. And I think I want to add that for those watching or those here, if you haven't, maybe haven't gone to the agenda packet, I know probably everybody has, but in case you haven't, I really do want to encourage everyone to read the narrative that is included in the materials. You can just read it at home. It's just got so much information, and really is moving, I think. And I want to just acknowledge the work that's gone into putting this together, and hope that as many people as possible read it and think about it, and then in the future, as the Heritage Trail comes into fruition, that we are all able to reflect and enjoy and celebrate and be a part of that space. So thank you, and I look forward to supporting this.
I look forward to supporting it too. As I mentioned on Monday, I thought it was a great presentation, a very joyful presentation, and that everyone did a great job pulling information together. And I would like to reiterate what Ms. Kern-Shear said about looking at the agenda. In fact, someone at a meeting yesterday asked me where they could get more information. And so just, come to the city's website, click on the agenda from Monday and today, and the narrative is right there.
I'm thrilled to support this as well. I feel like I've seen the map online so much that I just wish I could fast forward to actually walking it, post ribbon cutting, right? Plaques in the ground or commemorating wherever they will be. So I look forward to that day, but I'm really excited to get to support this. I know it's been years of work from our consultants and our community members. So thank you to everyone who got to partake in the process, and it's perfect timing for the birthday boy.
Yep. So I move that City Council approve the African American Heritage Trail narrative as proposed by the Advisory Committee.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kern-Shear?
Aye.
Okay. I don't believe that concludes our agenda. We don't have anything for closed session. Motion to adjourn.
So I move that we adjourn.
Before we do, though, I just want to remind everybody here in the audience and watching at home that the State of the City address will begin, the reception begins tonight at 5:30, and the presentation will begin at 6:15. So I hope to see everyone here. There's a nice catered event out front, and it should be a good time.
So a question to that effect, I just got a text on my watch asking if it will be available for the public to watch tonight. So I assume that just go to the city website.
So we broadcast it in a number of different mediums. Number one is it's on the public access channel if you've got the local cable carrier, and then also it'll be online in the various formats that you find at Facebook and whatnot, YouTube.
But if someone goes to the city website and clicks State of the City, that'll
Be able
show
to
them the
find it.
different options and direct them accordingly. Okay,
Second.
and we'll take autographs afterwards.
So I have a
Right.
second to adjourn. Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kern Chair?
Aye.